the night before the wedding. My fiancée, Sarah, gave the house/apartment as a shared asset, which I had saved and scrimped to buy, to her white moonlight as a birthday gift. She said, "A man can only stand tall when he owns his own place." The white moonlight hugged and kissed her, deeply moved. I turned and walked away. The house/apartment, as a shared asset, was gone. There was no point in having the wedding anymore. David called out to me from behind. "Robert, it's my birthday today. Where's my gift?" Seeing me coming to a birthday party empty-handed, the others in the private room/booth looked at me with disdain, whispering that I was just crashing the party/freeloading. Sarah's face was strained as she scolded me, "Robert, you have absolutely no manners. Who comes to a birthday party empty-handed? Go buy David a Rolex watch later as an apology." I had just gotten off work when she called me to this so-called birthday party, and I watched helplessly as she gave away our house/apartment as a shared asset. In the past, I would have argued fiercely with her, but now I was tired. Who says I didn't prepare a birthday gift? I took off the engagement ring on my hand, walked over, and put it on David's hand. "This ring is for you. Wish you a happy future together." After saying that, I walked out of the private room/booth without a moment's hesitation. Sarah chased after me, grabbing my wrist forcefully. "Robert, getting jealous should have a limit. I've always seen David as a Michael. Why are you saying such annoying things?" I said earnestly, "I didn't intend to annoy anyone. I just think he's more suited for that ring than I am." "David would care for that worn-out ring you've worn?" I said indifferently, "If he doesn't like it, he can just throw it away." Sarah's tone paused. "Fine. Don't ever ask me to buy you things again." With that, Sarah turned and left angrily. I had indeed pleaded for that ring originally. The day we got engaged, Sarah's parents demanded a sum of money demanded of $280,000 all at once and said they wouldn't provide any dowry/bride's family's contribution, specifically, lack thereof. I didn't care much about these material things. I gave her all my savings. My only request was that she buy me an engagement ring. But Sarah said I was materialistic, asking why a man would wear a ring. Because of this, I gave her the silent treatment for a week, which was rare for me. Only then did she reluctantly take me to buy a pair of matching rings/couples rings worth 2,000 yuan. I treasured it like a precious item and always wore it, but hers had long since been thrown away somewhere. Now I knew that things obtained by force or begging ultimately don't belong to you. After leaving the hotel, I walked along the sidewalk. The cold wind blew on me, but I couldn't feel any cold at all. Nothing could be colder than my heart. After some time, Sarah called me. "Robert, where did you go? My stomach hurts." "If your stomach hurts, take some medicine. Why are you looking for me?" In the past, whenever I heard Sarah say she wasn't feeling well somewhere, I would be extremely anxious, wishing I could immediately rush to her side to take care of her. But now, I wasn't going to be her free caretaker anymore. After hanging up Sarah's phone call, I immediately called Mr. Peterson, or John Peterson. "Mr. Peterson, or John Peterson, did you mean it when you said you wanted me to go overseas/abroad to be the marketing director?" Mr. Peterson, or John Peterson's voice was surprised. "Of course, I meant it. Robert, I've always appreciated your hardworking and fearless spirit. With you leading them to develop the overseas market, there will definitely be no problem. Thank you, Mr. Peterson, or John Peterson, for your appreciation. I will definitely not let you down." I booked the plane ticket to overseas/abroad for the following week. I went to the mall and bought the suit I had been eyeing for a long time and then went to a restaurant for a big meal. Actually, my salary wasn't low, but in the past, to buy the house/apartment as a shared asset, I had always been frugal, wanting to split every dollar in half. I dreamed of owning my own house/apartment as a shared asset, but just as this dream was about to come true, it was brutally shattered by Sarah. I sat in the mall for a long time until the mall closed before getting up to go back home/apartment. It was nearly midnight when I got home/apartment. As soon as I opened the door, deafening music hit my eardrums. David and a group of people were dancing in the living room. My carefully chosen leather sofa was covered in cake frosting/cream, and the floor was littered with trash. Every single thing in this room was furnished with my heart and effort. Seeing it ruined like this, more than anger, I felt heartbroken. I raised my hand to turn on the living room light. The crowd, who were having a blast, were suddenly interrupted by the glare and looked at me with displeasure. Suppressing my anger, I looked at them and said, "Get out." David walked over with a smug smile, holding the property deed/title. "Robert, you really are getting old and forgetful. Sarah already gave me the house/apartment as a shared asset. Did you forget?" His friends immediately echoed, "That's right, this is David's house/apartment as a shared asset now." We can party however we want. David, I think you should get the lock changed quickly, so that any random people don't sneak in. I snatched the property deed/title from David's hand and opened it, showing the names to everyone. Look closely, the names on it are mine and Sarah's. If you don't leave now, I'll call the police for trespassing. A hint of embarrassment flashed across David's face, but he quickly composed himself. Robert, what are you so proud of? Sarah already said she's transferring the property title to me tomorrow. This house/apartment, as a shared asset, is joy. NTLY owned by me and Sarah. To transfer the property title, both parties must sign. Since I don't agree, it's impossible to transfer the property title. Hearing this, David immediately got angry and called Sarah. 10 minutes later, Sarah rushed over. David immediately leaned over pitifully. Sarah, you clearly gave me this house/apartment as a shared asset, but Robert is now saying he's going to sue us for trespassing. Sarah frowned and came over, pulling my arm to drag me out. Robert, I've already given this house/apartment as a shared asset to David. You're being so embarrassing right now. Come back with me. I flung her hand away. Sarah, have you forgotten that I paid for this house/apartment as a shared asset? What right do you have to give it away to someone else? Having lost face in front of so many people, Sarah's voice rose. Robert, what do you mean now? Are you trying to settle accounts with me? Then what about the $500,000 I lent to my adopted parents, Mr. and Mrs. Davis? Why don't you mention that? David and his group looked at me in shock. Oh my God? Isn't he a sugar baby/someone living off a partner? What man uses a woman's money in this day and age? Sarah is so good-tempered to have put up with this someone supported financially by a partner for so long. Anyone who marries a man like this would be so unlucky. Their words made my face burn, and a deep sense of inferiority surged in my heart. I was adopted from an orphanage. My adopted parents, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, knew I was dating a rich girlfriend and asked Sarah for $500,000 under the guise of borrowing money. This was also the reason I had always felt insecure around Sarah. I once thought Sarah understood me, but now she was exposing my embarrassment so nakedly in front of everyone. I pretended to be calm and took out the account statement/record of expenses I had calculated while eating earlier. When I bought the house/apartment as a shared asset, I put in $630,000. Subtract 10. The $500,000 my adopted parents, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, took. You owe me $130,000. From now on, this house/apartment, as a shared asset, is yours alone. Sarah looked at the account statement/record of expenses in extreme shock, completely unprepared for this move. Robert, I always thought you were different from others. I didn't expect you to be so petty. I smiled. Sarah, since you're so generous, why don't you give me back the $130,000 you owe me? Provoked by my words, Sarah immediately took out her phone and transferred $130,000 to me on the spot. After instantly receiving it, I said, see you at the county clerk's office/deeds registry tomorrow morning at 8. Sarah gritted her teeth and said, fine. Robert, don't come crying back to me later. David, however, brightened up and immediately said, we'll be there on time. After leaving the neighborhood/apartment complex, I went straight to a hotel to rest. Looking at the $130,000 balance on my bank card, a wave of sadness welled up in my heart, unrestrained. Just then, David sent me a recording. In the recording, David's voice was contemptuous. Sarah, why are you with that poor kid, Robert? He has no looks, no physique. Sarah scoffed, just having some fun. A poor student like him, who's so poor he can barely afford to eat, yet keeps trying to maintain his pathetic dignity. Isn't it fun to tease him like that? But lately, I'm getting a bit annoyed with him, being overly controlling/meddlesome about everything. David's exaggerated, mocking laughter came through the recording. So, from the beginning, she was just playing with me. My first encounter with Sarah was in my sophomore year of college. When I got into university, my adopted parents, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, resented the cost of tuition and living expenses, and flat out said they wouldn't help pay for them. I worked 2 part-time jobs every day and always chose the cheapest meals at school. Long-term fatigue and malnutrition eventually led me to FAI/NT during a labor class. Sarah and a classmate sent me to the school infirmary. From then on, she entered my life. She claimed to have misdialed and loaded 1,000 yuan onto my meal card/student ID with meal credits. She would come find me every day and have me use the card to treat her to a meal, but she would always pick out the meat and give it to me. With her feeding me, my health gradually improved. Later, she confessed her feelings to me. But because of my family background, I didn't dare to accept her. She slowly broke down the sturdy defense line in my heart and walked into it. I once thought she was my salvation, but now I know that 5 years of youth and a heart full of love were ultimately misplaced. The next day, I got up early. To prevent Sarah and David from seeing my exhaustion, I styled my hair and put on the new suit I had bought. I instantly looked sharp. Even Sarah was momentarily stunned when she first saw me. Seeing this, David said with a slightly sour tone, "Robert, that suit you're wearing cost 2,600 yuan. Did you buy it with the 130,000 Sarah gave you yesterday?" Sarah frowned upon hearing this. "Robert, weren't you always the most frugal? Who told you to buy such an expensive suit?" A faint smile played on my lips as I looked at the two of them. First of all, the 130,000 Sarah gave me yesterday was what she owed me. It was my money to begin with. Secondly, I don't need anyone's permission to buy things. Before, I was frugal to buy the house/apartment as a shared asset and have a home/apartment with Sarah. But now the house/apartment as a shared asset is gone, and the person I wanted to spend my life with is also gone, so why should I be so frugal? David rolled his eyes at me in disdain and hooked Sarah's arm. "Sarah, let's go in quickly. 1 is my lucky number. I want to be the first person to transfer the property title today." But Sarah didn't move. She just looked at me and finally said, "Robert, don't you have anything to say to me?" I smiled and said, "Then I wish you achieve your wish. And congratulations to Mr. David on his new house/apartment as a shared asset." Sarah's face was extremely displeased. "Fine, don't you regret it?" The transfer of the property title went smoothly. David walked out of the county clerk's office/deeds registry happily, holding the property deed/title with his name on it. The matter was finally settled. As I was about to leave, Sarah called out to me from behind. "The bridal shop called yesterday and asked us to choose wedding photos today. Seeing as you dressed up so handsomely today to please me, I'll let you come with me to choose." I turned around and looked at her as if she were an idiot. "Sarah, do you think I would still marry you when the house/apartment as a shared asset is gone?" A flicker of panic appeared in Sarah's eyes, and she pressed me. "Robert, what do you mean by that?" I told her solemnly, "We're breaking up. The wedding is off. Do you understand?" "Robert, what kind of joke are you playing? The wedding is next week, everything is ready. Now you're telling me the wedding is cancelled? Are you messing with me? You could casually give away the house/apartment as a shared asset to someone else, and all I'm asking is to cancel the wedding. That's nothing compared to you." I shifted my gaze to David and said, "If it really comes down to it, maybe the groom can be temporarily replaced too. David took your house/apartment as a shared asset and your engagement ring, so it's normal for him to be your groom." David held the property deed/title and looked at Sarah with bright eyes. "Sarah, I'll do whatever you say." Sarah's tone was serious. "Robert, haven't I told you before? I've always treated David like a Michael. David is all alone with no one to rely on. He wouldn't know how long it would take him to buy his own house/apartment as a shared asset if he relied on himself. As an older sister, I should help him out a bit. WH. Why are you getting jealous all the time?" Sarah had told me more than once that David's parents died when he was young, and he had been living with his uncle's family, which was very pathetic. She asked me to be more accommodating to him. I retorted, "David is pitiful, so he can rely on you, and you give him a house/apartment as a shared asset. What about me? Aren't I pitiful? What have you given me?" Sarah said as if it were obvious, "You have me. Isn't it enough to have me by your side?" Ha! She really had some nerve. Not wanting to argue with her anymore, I turned and left. That evening, I posted an update on social media post, e.g., Facebook/Instagram, announcing the end of my relationship with Sarah and the cancellation of our wedding. Many college classmates expressed regret, saying that we were so in love and had a sweetheart story, from college sweethearts to marriage. Yes. If I hadn't heard those recordings, I would have also believed that Sarah and I had at least loved each other once. But now I knew it was all a facade. Not long after the post was published, Sarah called me. "Robert, who gave you permission to unilaterally announce the cancellation of the wedding? Our wedding is not cancelled." I said coldly, "Whether you cancel the wedding or not is your business, but I won't be there." "Sarah, we're done." Sarah asked persistently, "Robert, are you really breaking up with me just because of a house/apartment as a shared asset?" "Yes, just because of a house/apartment as a shared asset." Perhaps Sarah would never understand that it wasn't just a house/apartment as a shared asset to me, it represented a home/apartment. Hearing the decisiveness in my tone, her voice sounded like a compromise. "Big deal, we'll buy another house/apartment as a shared asset. We can save for another 2 years, pay the down payment, and then pay the mortgage every month, okay?" Recalling the past 2 years, I hadn't bought a single new piece of clothing for Tufu. years to save money for the house/apartment as a shared asset. Even if I was hungry outside, I would go home/apartment to cook, just to save as much money as possible. The thought of getting closer to my dream house/apartment as a shared asset filled me with determination, no matter how hard it was. Yet, with just one sentence, she gave the house/apartment as a shared asset to her white moonlight. Now she was casually telling me to save for another 2 years. And after saving for 2 years, I'd be burdened with a mortgage and save for another 30 years? Am I some kind of worthless person, only fit to suffer by her side? Sarah, the house/apartment as a shared asset is still something I dreamed of, but I don't want to own it with you anymore. As soon as I hung up with Sarah, my adopted parents, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, phone call came right after. They immediately started yelling and cursing at me, implying that since I was canceling the wedding with Sarah, they wouldn't return the money they borrowed from Sarah. They told me to figure out how to pay it back myself. I wasn't surprised by this outcome. From the moment they received the money, they had already used it all to invest for Michael. So, I never expected them to return it. However, I still needed this money to help me do one last thing. I told them I would go home/apartment tomorrow to discuss what to do. That night, Sarah relentlessly sent me hundreds of messages, starting with a demanding tone ordering me not to cancel the wedding, and later softening to pleading. I didn't even finish reading the messages before blocking her. The next day, I took the agreement/legal document I had drafted early and went back to my home/apartment. My adopted father, Mr. Davis, my adopted mother, Mrs. Davis, and Michael all looked at me with disgust, as if I were a source of contamination that would pollute the home/apartment if I entered. Finally, my adopted mother, Mrs. Davis, was the first to speak. "Robert, things were going so well, you were about to get married. What happened?" I looked at them calmly. "Sarah's family is asking for a sum of money demanded of $288,000, and they also require you to return the $500,000 you borrowed, otherwise they won't let their daughter marry me." My adopted mother, Mrs. Davis, immediately shook her head repeatedly upon hearing this. "That's definitely not possible. Since we adopted you, we've provided for you, sent you to university, and spent a lot of money. Where would we have extra money for a sum of money demanded?" I sneered inwardly. Did she really say that without fear of divine retribution? My adopted father, Mr. Davis, slammed the table. "If you don't get married, you don't get married. Can't a man find a wife these days? Sarah's family said if we don't get married, you have to return the $500,000 to their family." Hearing this, Michael, who had been playing video games with his head down, became flustered. "That's even worse. I've already invested that money with friends. I definitely can't get it back anytime soon." I pretended to look troubled at them. "Then what should we do?" "If you don't return it, Sarah's family said they'll call the police and accuse you of fraud." My adopted mother, Mrs. Davis, said, "Fraud? What fraud? You're a grown man, can't you entertain their daughter for a few years for free?" Hearing that, I felt extremely uncomfortable. I didn't want to beat around the bush with them anymore and said directly, "There's another way. I can severing ties with you, and I'll take on the debt of $500,000. That way, even if Sarah's family calls the police later, they can only come after me." As soon as this suggestion was made, the three of them instantly looked at me with shining eyes and said it was a great idea. I took out the legal separation agreement, focus on financial/legal aspect, and the three of them signed it without hesitation. After signing, I intended to leave. However, my adopted mother, Mrs. Davis, said she had prepared many dishes and asked me to stay for lunch before leaving. Thinking this would likely be the last family meal we four would have together, I agreed. With their major concern resolved, my adopted mother, Mrs. Davis, went to cook, my adopted father, Mr. Davis, watched his spy movie/thriller, and Michael continued playing video games. It was as if I was the only extra person. I pushed open the bathroom door. The fold-out bed/cot I used to sleep on was no longer there. Our home/apartment was a 2-bedroom apartment. One bedroom was for my adopted parents, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, and one was for Michael. When I was first adopted, I had my own room. Later, Michael was born. My room became just a fold-out bed/cot. Wherever the fold-out bed/cot was moved, the living room, the bathroom, that's where I slept. Since childhood, they had never treated me as a real family member, which left me with a deep sense of not belonging. This was also why I wanted to build a home/apartment with Sarah. I wanted to have a true home/apartment that belonged solely to me. My adopted mother, Mrs. Davis, did prepare many dishes, but ironically, the table full of dishes were all things Michael liked, none of which I liked. I swallowed the food as if chewing wax, then walked out of the neighborhood/apartment complex like a zombie. Unexpectedly, at the entrance of the neighborhood/apartment complex, I saw Sarah rushing towards me. Sarah looked at me with concern and handed me tissues. Only then did I realize I was crying. No wonder my face felt cold. Every time you come back to your home/apartment, you're unhappy for a long time. Why do you still come back? I took the tissues, wiped the tears from my face, calmed down, and said, because I came back to tell them that I'm canceling the wedding with you. Sarah's expression froze. Robert, haven't I already said I'll make money with you to buy a house/apartment as a shared asset again? Why do you keep dwell ing on this point? I walked away expressionlessly. Because I don't love you anymore. Is that reason enough? No, I don't believe it. You loved me so much before. I don't believe you can just stop loving me all of a sudden. Believe it or not, it's up to you. Just then, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID clearly displayed David. Sarah hesitated before answering. David, didn't I tell you to try not to call me so much? David's voice, filled with pain, came from the other end of the phone. Sarah, I twisted my ankle when I went downstairs and fell. Sarah's voice held a hint of anxiety. David, where did you fall? I'll be right there. David gave an address. Sarah hung up and was about to rush over. She had already gotten into the car when she remembered I was still there, so she rolled down the driver's side window. She looked at me with a difficult expression. Robert, David twisted his ankle. I'll take him to the hospital and then come back for you. I smiled faintly and nodded. Go ahead. Don't keep him waiting. I know twisting an ankle is very painful. Having received my permission, Sarah seemed to breathe a sigh of relief and said, I'll be back soon. Wait for me. The car merged into the traffic like an arrow released from a bow. I had seen this scene many times before. Whenever and wherever, David's call could take her away, and then she would never come back. Actually, Sarah was wrong. I didn't suddenly stop loving her. My love had long been worn away by countless waits and disappointments. Sure enough, shortly after, I saw David's social media post, e.g., Facebook/Instagram, update. Sarah once said that whenever I needed her, she would be there for me, and she has never broken her promise. The accompanying photo was a side view of Sarah feeding him porridge. Looking further down, there were yesterday's updates. She said a man can only stand tall when he owns a house/apartment as a shared asset, so she gave me one. So happy. She took me to Disney, which I've wanted to visit for a long time. In the past, I had many arguments with Sarah because of these social media posts, e.g., Facebook/Instagram, updates. Now, I liked each of his posts. It wasn't until I had washed up and was lying in the hotel that Sarah remembered me and called. Her voice was weary. Robert, I'm here to pick you up. Where are you? No need. I'm already back home/apartment. Sarah's tone held a hint of blame. Why did you leave without telling me, making me come all this way for nothing? Don't you know I'm very tired today? I said mockingly, Sarah, do you take me for a fool? Look at what time it is. Why would you think I would still be waiting for you? But the old me was indeed a fool. Once, on a rare holiday, Sarah and I agreed to go hiking together. But halfway up, Sarah was called away by David's phone call. She told me to go up and wait for her. I climbed to the summit alone, waiting from sunrise until the moon rose. Actually, even then, I knew in my heart that Sarah wouldn't come, but I stubbornly waited at the summit, just wanting to know if Sarah would remember me. Later, she did remember me. The first thing she did when she called was to scold me fiercely. Robert, are you an idiot? If I didn't show up, couldn't you have come back earlier? Who were you standing there for? Clearly, Sarah also remembered this incident. She said softly, apologizing, I'm sorry, Robert. I promise I won't leave you behind again. Your apology is worthless. For the next few days, Sarah either called me every day or waited for me downstairs at the company/office. But most of the time, even when she found me, she would be called away by David's phone call after only a few words. Then she would call me back to apologize, repeating this cycle until the day before the wedding. Sarah looked at me seriously. Robert, David was discharged from the hospital today. You know he has no family, only I can help him with the discharge procedures. Boo. I promise you this is the last time. After we get married tomorrow, I will definitely reduce my contact with him and keep my distance. I didn't know where Sarah got her confidence. She stubbornly believed that my indifference towards her these past few days, including saying we broke up and canceling the wedding, were just words said in anger. She believed I would definitely show up at our wedding on time tomorrow. I didn't want to explain anything further. After giving her a perfunctory send-off, I went back and packed my suitcase. As it happened, the day I was flying overseas/abroad with my colleagues from the market department was also tomorrow. By then, Sarah would realize I wasn't joking. Early the next morning, I wheeled my suitcase and met up with my market department colleagues at the airport. Before boarding, I checked the messages Sarah had sent me. Robert, why hasn't the picking up the bride vehicle team arrived yet? Robert, the bridal shop owner said you didn't go to pick up the vehicle today? Robert, today is our wedding. Where are you? I sent her my location, sent via phone, at the airport, then boarded the plane directly and turned off my phone. The thought of Sarah being frantic and overwhelmed on the other end made me feel much better. Looking at the blue sky and white clouds outside the window, I knew I was about to embark on a new life. It was 6 months later when I returned. As the overseas market director, I returned to headquarters to report on our performance over the past half year. After finishing the annual report/year-end review, I walked out of the company/office and saw Sarah standing at the company/office entrance. She had lost her former radiance and looked worn out. The moment she saw me, she eagerly rushed forward and hugged me. Robert, where have you been for the past 6 months? I looked for you for so long, everywhere, but couldn't find you. I had heard from headquarters that Sarah was looking for me, but I had told them in advance not to reveal my whereabouts. They also found Sarah's behavior of giving the house/apartment as a shared asset to another man quite off-putting and all avoided her. After Sarah hit a wall a few times, she stopped coming. I thought she had already given up. I placed my palms on her shoulders and pushed her away, examining her with a critical gaze. Looking at her now, my taste in the past was truly poor. To have loved such a bad woman to the point of almost losing myself was too humiliating. My voice was also incredibly distant and cold. Sarah, why are you still looking for me? I believe I made it clear to you a long time ago. Sarah said emotionally, Robert, let me take you somewhere. Once you see it, you'll definitely forgive me. Sorry, my time is very valuable. I don't have time to waste with you. After saying that, I turned to leave. Sarah, however, grabbed my wrist, pushed me into the back seat of the car, and locked the door smoothly. I was about to call the police when I heard Sarah say to me in a pleading voice, Robert, please come with me to this place. I promise, if you still can't forgive me after seeing it, I will never bother you again. Against my better judgment, I put down my phone. At the same time, I was a little curious about the place she mentioned that made her so confident. The car drove along an increasingly familiar route and finally stopped downstairs in the neighborhood/apartment complex of our former house/apartment as a shared asset. I already had a vague premonition. Sarah took me upstairs and stopped at the door of our former house/apartment as a shared asset. She took out a key and opened the door. The room was decorated the way I had originally furnished it. There was a solid-colored fabric sofa, a bouquet of tulips on the table, and even the ornaments that David and his group had broken were replaced with identical ones. Sarah took out a bright red property deed/title and opened it. It Clea RLY showed my name and Sarah's name, with a change date from 3 months ago. Sarah handed the property deed/title to me and looked at me sincerely. Robert, I was wrong before. David and I grew up together. His parents died early, and people around me often told me to protect him and take care of him since we were young. Over time, protecting him and taking care of him became a deeply rooted obsession in my heart. But in the past 6 months since you left, I realized that you are the most important man in my heart, the person I love most. Now I've taken the house/apartment as a shared asset back. Let the conflict between us, which started because of the house/apartment as a shared asset, end because of the house/apartment as a shared asset as well. Her words were beautiful and easily moving, but they could only fool the old me. The current me didn't need them anymore. I took out the keys to my own house/apartment as a shared asset from my bag and jingled them in front of her. Now, I don't need to rely on anyone. I have the ability to achieve anything I ever wanted on my own. The past 6 months developing the market overseas/abroad were very tough, but at the same time, I received corresponding rewards. My salary doubled compared to before. With 6 months of salary plus the previous 130,000 yuan, I paid the down payment and bought myself a small 60 square meter apartment. The apartment wasn't big, and the location wasn't luxurious, but for me, it was enough. This was a true home/apartment that belonged solely to me. It was my home/apartment alone. Sarah looked at the keys in my hand on the spot, speechless for a long time. Finally, she looked at me with red eyes. Robert, is there really no chance for us anymore? I said without hesitation, no. Tears rolled down her cheeks one by one. I knew this time she had truly given up. She confidently took the house/apartment as a shared asset back from David and painstakingly restored the decoration. of the house/apartment as a shared asset to its original state, thinking she could finally win my forgiveness this time. But she was severely struck down by my house/apartment as a shared asset. I turned and left directly. I had no obligation to comfort her now. Coming downstairs, I ran right into David. David looked at me with hateful eyes. "Robert, you must be very proud now, aren't you? Do you think you won?" I never paid attention to him before, and I certainly wouldn't now. I simply ignored him and continued to leave. David, however, shouted unwillingly behind me, "Robert, I'm telling you, Sarah is pregnant with my child. She will definitely belong to me." I smiled indifferently, and words of blessing escaped my lips. "Then I wish you two all the best." This trip back turned out to be quite troublesome. Just when I had successfully dealt with Sarah, my adopted parents, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, came to the company/office and made a scene. It turned out that Michael's investment of $500,000 had gone down the drain, and he had been tricked by fraud into going overseas/abroad. Now the perpetrators were demanding a ransom of $1 million. They used their life savings and sold the old neighborhood/apartment complex to raise $700,000. They then set their sights on me for the remaining $300,000. I immediately called the police and had them taken away. Later, they tried to gain sympathy online, attempting to use filial duty/obligation to parents, framed as a tool for manipulation, for emotional blackmail. I directly posted the legal separation agreement, focus on financial/legal aspect, online and published a long article about my experiences since being adopted. It instantly resonated with many orphans, and I realized that there were so many people in the world with similar experiences to mine. We encouraged and supported each other online. They even saw me as a role model. We cannot choose our birth or our parents, but we can forge our own future with our own hands. An unyielding determination. My adopted parents, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, attempt to use filial duty/obligation to parents, framed as a tool for manipulation, to blackmail me for money failed, and they were instead cyberbullied, never daring to show their faces online again. Later, I heard that they still borrowed money from everywhere to gather $1 million. But Michael was ultimately not redeemed. The old couple suffered a mental breakdown due to losing their child in their old age and eventually committed suicide. After hearing this news, I still took a day off and returned to collect their remains. 5 years later, I had been promoted to vice president of the company/office and transferred back to headquarters. The company/office had a charity event/fundraiser to help children with heart disease recover. I attended as the company/office representative. I didn't expect to see Sarah again at this event. She was holding a thin, weak boy, applying for the company/office's aid quota. Only then did I learn that David had used drugs to get Sarah pregnant, and the two later married because of the pregnancy. However, due to the effects of the drugs, the child's development in the womb was incomplete, and he was born with a severe heart condition. They had exhausted their savings to treat the child, and David had run away. After all, we had known each other once. I spoke to the relevant department personnel, and Sarah's child successfully received the aid quota. After the event ended, I got into the car arranged by the company/office to leave. Sarah ran over with her child to thank me. I waved my hand indifferently. Later, a colleague asked me why I didn't take this opportunity to get revenge on her and vent my anger from back then. I told her it was no longer necessary. When people who started at the same point meet again years later, and I am at the peak of my life while she has faded into the crowd and has to accept my charity, that is already more painful for her. And any revenge could be.